The wedding reception was held on the 36th floor of the Skyview Hotel, where every light seemed to melt into the city's night sky. Beneath a ceiling of glittering crystal, soft jazz drifted as if time itself had slowed, just enough for the champagne to dissolve on the tip of one's tongue. Cassidy Jameson stood pressed against one of the glass pillars, a wine glass in hand, trying her best to blend into the background. She didn't know anyone here except the Bryden Old College friend who had now stepped into the upper echelons of society by marrying a marketing director at Airnova. Cassidy, on the other hand, was still just an unnoticed internal communications employee. Wearing a rented olive green dress and shoes a bit too loose, handed down from her sister. Alone. A deep voice rose beside her. Cassidy turned her, reflexes sharp like a stray cat. The man standing there wore a perfectly tailored black suit, a deep blue tie, and carried eyes sharp enough to shred through any lie. Handsome to the point she nearly had to sip her wine to steady herself, just enjoying a rare moment of quiet. Cassidy replied with a polite smile. She was about to turn away when he leaned slightly closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Do me a favor. Pretend to be my girlfriend tonight." Cassidy nearly choked. "Excuse me?" "Just tonight," he said. His eyes fixed on a group, watching them from afar, the unmistakable circle of powerful matrons clearly plotting another CEO matchmaking scheme. She followed his gaze and immediately understood. Being set up again. "Third time this month," he said flatly, his voice as blunt as a financial report. "I need an escape." "And you?" His glance flickered toward her, showed up at the perfect moment. Cassidy let out a soft laugh, half in disbelief, half too tired to argue. "And you think I'll say yes just because I'm standing here alone?" "No," he said. "Because I'm guessing you don't enjoy the pity stares from women in sequin gowns worth a few $1,000s either." This time, she laughed for real touche. He extended a hand. "Weston Cade." She froze. The name was anything but unfamiliar. The new CEO of Airnova certainly the talk of both media and company insiders for taking over the conglomerate at only 35. Cold, no social media, no scandals, and absolutely no public relationships. "Cassidy," she said, leaving out her last name, part caution, part instinct. And without knowing why, she placed her hand into his. Moments later, they walked together across the murmuring crowd. All eyes turned toward them, like invisible spotlights. "Who's that woman?" "Must be Weston Cade's new girlfriend. Doesn't look like the type he usually entertains. Still, they look good together, don't they?" Cassidy forced a smile, taking another sip of wine to disguise the sudden pounding of her heart. Weston remained perfectly calm, as if he'd been rehearsing this act for years. He rested a light hand on her back, subtle, practiced. Exactly like a longtime partner without showiness. "You're good at this," Cassidy whispered, tilting her head slightly. "I'm not acting," Weston replied without looking at her. She blinked, startled, then forced herself to stay collected. "Do you use that line on all your one-night stand imposters?" "No," Weston said, this time turning his gaze fully on her. "Just you." Simple words. But in that moment, mid the music and the shimmering lights, Cassidy felt she wasn't standing on the cold marble floor of a banquet hall anymore. She was on a stage, pulled into a play, one without a script. She swallowed, steadying herself. "All right then, Mr. Cade. Tonight, I'm your girlfriend. But tomorrow, I go back to being an underpaid comes girl with a desk next to the ladies' restroom. Okay?" Weston gave a small nod. "I only need you until the party ends. After that, you're free." Cassidy lifted her glass, eyes gleaming with mischief, to the shortest love story ever staged. Weston clinked his glass lightly against hers. "Or longer than you think." And just like that, from a single whisper over wine, A charade began, but perhaps neither of them realized. They were stepping into something far more real than either had planned. Cassidy Jameson wasn't the type to be easily swayed. She had written hundreds of newsletters, edited thousands of corporate messages, all crafted to help powerful people hide their weak spots. She knew which glances were genuine, which words were rehearsed. And yet, that Tuesday morning after the wedding, when the elevator door slid open and Weston Cade stepped out, her heart still skipped a beat. He didn't belong in this space. Too polished, too quiet, and above all, too cold. The entire floor seemed to freeze the moment Weston entered with his assistant. Cassidy watched from behind a partition, noticing how her colleague's eyes lit up as if a movie star had just walked in. Weston's eyes, however, remained indifferent till they stopped at her desk. "Cassidy Jameson?" he asked, though he clearly knew exactly who she was. "Close enough. On the intranet, I'm the internal communications editor for Section 3. Lover of black coffee and notorious complainer about the printer," she replied, standing up, fingers still gripping her mouse like an anchor to sanity. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but perhaps the rarest expression a man like Weston would allow himself. "I need 5 minutes," he said. "The West meeting room is free," Cassidy pointed. And before she could process what was happening, she found herself walking behind him, silently cursing her heels for clicking so awkwardly. Anything but elegant. The door closed. No more typing sounds, no more curious stares. Just her and Weston, and a silence so thick it pressed against her skin. "You acted better than I expected," Weston began, his voice low and even, as if they were discussing next quarter's budget, not a charade from Saturday night. "Is that a compliment?" Cassidy raised a brow. "It's the truth." She crossed her arms, leaning lightly against the table. "Let's cut to the chase, Mr. Cade. CEOs don't come down to the 15th floor just to make small talk." Weston slid a folder across the table. "Not a contract, but a communications plan. We're about to hold a series of shareholder events. Pressure is mounting from both media and internal teams. The board believes I need a more stable personal image." Translation out of PR language. "They want to see their CEO with a girlfriend," Cassidy concluded, her tone dry. Weston nodded. "And you by accident made things easier." Cassidy studied him. Half of her wanted to laugh. The other half wanted to ask what on earth made him think this was a normal proposal. "You're asking me to keep pretending to be your girlfriend? For how long? Until the evaluation period ends." 3 months, maybe 4. Cassidy rested her chin on her hand. "And what exactly do I get from this performance?" "The freedom to walk away at any time. A fair compensation." And he paused, his gaze brushing against hers. "Access to every high-level event, including places where internal comms isn't usually allowed." Cassidy's heart stilled for half a beat. He knew she'd been eyeing those mysteriously vanishing CSR budgets. He knew she suspected something wasn't right. And now he was dangling the juiciest bait in front of her. "I don't sell myself that cheaply," she murmured, though she wasn't sure whether she was speaking to Weston or to herself. "No signatures needed," he said. "Consider it a silent pact. Like that night, just a roll. But the better we play it, the easier life becomes for both of us." Cassidy stayed quiet. Outside, the PA system reminded employees to check in for the weekly meeting. Inside, her pulse thudded, slow and heavy. She looked at Weston, the man who, just days ago, was nothing more than a cold name on paper. Now standing at the crossroads of her investigation and something she couldn't yet define. "One condition," she said softly. "I want full authority to walk away if this game ever compromises my dignity." "I won't let your dignity be harmed," Weston replied, without hesitation. "And if I vanish in the middle of a party, you don't send your assistant chasing after me." I won't be treated like a PR prop. This time, Weston's mouth curved an actual smile, fleeting but real. Deal. Cassidy sighed, picked up the folder, and stood. I don't trust you completely, but I do trust my ability to pretend. That's enough, Weston said, opening the door for her. We start this Friday, a charity gala. Cassidy gave a small nod, stepping out. Her voice lingered behind her. I'll fit the role. Don't expect me to smile like some Disney princess. Just don't trip like last time, he murmured, low but clear. Cassidy didn't turn back, but her cheeks warmed, and so an unsigned contract was sealed not with ink, but with glances, with caution, and with boundaries neither dared admit would soon be broken. Airnova's charity gala unfolded inside a classical art museum, where marble statues stood like silent witnesses to the whispered bargains traded between men in tailored suits and silver watches worth millions. Cassidy, Kisa Jameson, stepped out of the company-rented Bentley, her deep sapphire gown cut close enough to be alluring yet modest enough to command respect. Her hair was pinned high, simple earrings catching the light. She felt like part of the exhibition herself, an artifact carefully curated for display. The other door opened. Weston Cade emerged, fastening his jacket button, the lighting catching in his steel-gray eyes as if he had stepped out of a luxury campaign ad. He offered his hand. Wordless. Cassidy placed her hand on his. Cold, firm, but steady. Welcome to the world where every compliment carries a price tag, he murmured as they walked onto the red carpet. And wear the right smile at the right moment can save an entire brand, Cassidy replied softly, tilting her head as if smiling at someone in the distance. I see you're starting to understand the role. No, I'm just pretending this is a PR crisis campaign with a 2-hour deadline. Weston gave her a sideways glance. When did you start using sarcasm as armor? About 15. I realized people don't hurt the girl who unsettles them first. He paused. Defense or attack? Depends on who's staring back. They entered the grand hall. Violins sang. Champagne flutes glistened. Aviation executives laughed around. White-draped tables. Cassidy walked beside Weston as though they'd known each other for years. Curious stares, startled whispers, subtle judgments, they didn't make her falter. She only returned a faint, unreadable smile, keeping perfect pace with him. Who is she? Looks familiar. Isn't she one of the Wheeler girls? No. I heard she works at the company. Communications, I think. Strange. Weston never brings anyone. Maybe this time it's real. Cassidy lifted her chin, expression serene. When cameras began to flash, Weston's arm slipped lightly around her waist. He whispered against her ear, smile, unless you want them thinking I dragged you here by force. You did drag me. Technically, she retorted, but her lips curved into a smile. One polished enough to be captivating, yet distant enough to protect herself. Over an hour passed, and Cassidy played her role flawlessly. She spoke with a few directors, dodged probing questions about her past, and listened as Weston introduced her again and again as Cassidy, the one who made me believe there might be something worth noticing beyond work. He said it 3 times. The first time, Cassidy forced a polite laugh. The second, she blushed. By the third, she genuinely forgot how to react. Where do you get those lines? She asked when they retreated to a quiet corner near the buffet. I'm a CEO. Convincing people of things I don't feel is a daily exercise. I should find that disgusting. But I'm not angry, Cassidy whispered, eyes fixed on her berry salad. That's concerning. And then everything shifted. She was reaching for another glass of water when she caught 2 middle-aged men murmuring behind a marble bust. One of them was Gerald Marks, the head of CSR, the very man she had been quietly investigating. We'll have to move it to the Aegis Fund. Malta isn't safe anymore. Relax. Weston doesn't touch that. Sector Damon still signs off. Cassidy nearly dropped her glass. Aegis, Malta, Damon. 3 names. The very same ones she had seen in last week's budget sheets she had secretly printed on, now they resurfaced here. Whispered under chandeliers. 3 steps from her. She stepped back, face composed, though adrenaline roared in her veins. Returning to Weston, she carried a small plate, her hand trembling slightly. Dessert, she said lightly, offering him a lemon mousse. Weston took it, eyes steady on her. What did you just overhear? What? She feigned innocence. Your eyes shifted faster than normal, your hands holding the spoon wrong. And you don't like lemon. Cassidy froze, stunned. You always notice that much? When? The person beside me is in a room full of daggers. Yes. You vanish for 3 minutes and suspicion already sharpens. I just needed some water. Next time, warn me. Cassidy tightened her grip on the plate. We're pretending. That doesn't mean I belong to you. Weston said nothing, but his eyes no longer looked cold. Something deeper lingered. They're indistinct, like the uncharted bottom of the sea. When the gala ended, Weston opened the car door for her. Cassidy slid in, careful to maintain the same distance as always. No sarcasm this time. No banter. Only a strange silence, so heavy it almost made her feel guilty for eavesdropping. But she couldn't stop, because what she had overheard tonight turned their charade into a direct path toward a scandal. Part of her began to tremble, not from fear, but from knowing she was stepping into a dangerous game, where every glance, every word, might be a puzzle piece leading to the truth. And Weston, Kata, man beside her in the dark car, could end up being her greatest ally, or the very man she would one day have to expose. Cassidy was never one for classical music. She had once called Beethoven the guy with messy hair and a broken heart. But that evening, when Weston Cade appeared at the door of her apartment building, no driver, no warning, just a simple suit and shoes that weren't polished to perfection, Cassidy knew instantly. This was not part of the arrangement. What are you doing here? She asked, holding half a box of cookies in her hand. Kidnapping you for a night off, he said, voice as even as always. No cameras, no galas, no obligations. And where exactly are we going? A secret wine cellar. An art auction? The City Theater, Weston replied. There's a concert. Beethoven and Rachmaninoff. Cassidy almost dropped the box. His car wasn't like before, no driver. No glossy leather interior, just a charcoal gray sedan. Spotless to the point of being impersonal. Don't tell me you actually enjoy classical music, Cassidy said, as they drove through the streets glowing with light. I don't hate it, Weston answered, eyes fixed on the road. My mother used to play piano at night. I grew up with that sound. Cassidy turned to him. That's the first time you've mentioned your mother. Because it's the first time you asked without sarcasm, he said, the corner of his mouth faintly curving. She stayed quiet, then asked softly, and your father? He didn't play music. He played power. The car turned down a cobblestone drive leading to the Grand Theater. An usher opened the door, bowing. Cassidy stepped out, gazing up at the domed building, its statues softened by the golden glow of evening lights. This doesn't look like any clause in the contract. Weston, she remarked as they walked side by side, her simple linen dress standing in stark contrast to the glittering gowns around them. Exactly, Weston replied. I'm testing what happens when no one is watching. They sat in the third row, center stage. The lights dimmed. The murmurs faded. And then, the first notes unfurled. Beethoven gentle as breath. Then, Rachmaninoff turbulent, aching, like the heart of a man who never speaks his truth. Cassidy tilted her head slightly, her eyes stealing a glance at the man beside her. Weston sat upright, eyes closed, hands resting on his lap, still as stone, but his expression different. No invisible walls, no calculating gaze. Just a man listening to his memories. "When I was little," Weston murmured as the orchestra shifted movements, "my mother said, 'Peter, if you cannot speak, then listen.'" Cassidy turned. "Did you just call yourself Peter?" He opened his eyes and looked at her. "Middle name." "She called me that when she played. Is she still alive?" "She died when I was 11. And your father, still alive. Much too alive." She didn't laugh, didn't flinch. She only sat there, looking straight at him. "You're lonely, Weston," Cassidy whispered. "And you hide it by making people afraid of you." He was silent for a long moment. "If I'm not strong, I don't survive. Strong doesn't. Mean, unfeeling." For the first time, he didn't argue. After the concert, Weston didn't drive her straight home. They walked along the riverbank, where the lights shimmered on the water like fallen stars. Cassidy folded her arms against the cold, breath trailing white in the air. "I used to think you didn't know how to do anything except control people. Now, I still think that. But now I understand why." He studied her for a long moment. "And what about you, Cassidy Jameson? What do you hide behind all that sarcasm?" She smiled faintly, bittersweet. "I used to lead with my feelings, got crushed for it. Now I joke first, so no one dares step closer. So am I the exception. You're a CEO. No one gets closer to a CEO without a strategy." Weston laughed a real laugh this time. Low, rough, so brief Cassidy almost doubted she'd heard it. "You should laugh more." She said, "You should feel less," he countered. Their eyes met. No distance, no roles. Just two people with masks beginning to crack. When Weston finally pulled up to her building, Cassidy turned to him. "Why a concert? Why not another fancy dinner like all the others?" "Because tonight I didn't need anyone else to see you," he said. "I just wanted you to see me." Her breath caught. He leaned down, not kissing her, only whispering so softly by her ear, "Thank you for not laughing when I spoke about my mother." And then he turned away. No demands, no grasping hand, no coercion. Cassidy stood against the wooden door, her heart beating like the cello's echo in the night. In that moment, she knew. Weston Cade wasn't only her thread into an investigation. Not just the cold CEO in an unsigned contract. He was a symphony quiet Laerdand. If she wasn't careful, she might just learn every note by heart. Monday morning, Cassidy walked into the communications office with an iced coffee in hand and a heart beating out of rhythm. After the concert with Weston, she still couldn't tell how much of what she felt was pretend any more or worse. Whether Weston himself was still pretending. She powered on her computer, plugged in her headphones, and scrolled through hundreds of routine internal emails. Then, one small attachment from the legal department blinked on her screen like a jolt straight to her memory. Subject: Internal Access Request. Aegis Fund Transaction Report archived. Cassidy straightened in her chair, pulse hammering. Aegis, that name, she had overheard it at the gala, whispered in the shadows between two powerful men. And now it appeared in her inbox, marked for temporary access, valid only 24 hours. A rare opportunity. She opened the file. The first line was a table of CSR. Fund disbursements from Airnova to something called Aegis Support Fund headquartered in Malta. The amounts had been issued regularly for 8 months. But what made Cassidy's skin prickle was the name on the final approval line. Damon R. Deputy CFO, not Weston. Cassidy scrolled further, her stomach tightening as though she were balancing on a wire. At the bottom was a scanned authorization form. The seal was faint, the signature trembling. Nothing like Weston Cade's sharp decisive pen strokes she'd seen before. Something didn't add up. That afternoon, a message from Weston lit up her phone. Meet at 6:30 p.m., new aircraft unveiling. Small crowd, but I still need you there. Cassidy considered declining. She hadn't even processed what she'd just uncovered. But another thought slipped in. The closer she stayed, the more she could observe. 6:30 p.m., private Air Nova hangar. Cassidy arrived in a white coat, nude lipstick, eyes sharpened as always. Weston met her at the entrance, habitual, unspoken. "You don't have to fake smiles tonight," he said quietly, eyes on the gleaming jet lit by floodlights. "Just stand beside me." Cassidy turned toward him. "If I'm smiling, it's because I just saw the deputy CFO sign off on $500,000 to a Malta-based fund with no transparent documentation attached." Weston stilled. Barely, but enough for her to notice. "Damon," he asked. "You didn't know," Cassidy pressed. "I've approved some CSR-related transfers," Weston replied, gaze locked on hers. "But not Malta. The signature doesn't look like yours." "Still, I don't have enough evidence to confirm anything," she murmured. "I'm investigating. And I don't want to drag you into it if you're innocent." "And if I'm not?" he asked, suddenly tilting his head closer. Cassidy drew a long breath. "Then I'll write the story. Not because I hate you, but because it's what I have to do." Silence. The air between them thickened. "Thank you for saying it to my face," Weston said at last, voice low. "I'd rather be betrayed by someone brave than defended by someone silent." After the unveiling, they didn't drive straight back. Weston took the wheel, not asking where she wanted to go. And she didn't object. He stopped at a lakeside road where the city lights were nothing more than an orange haze on the horizon. No press, no eyes. "I used to think you were like everyone else," Weston said, one hand resting loosely on the steering wheel. "Drawn in, curious, then gone once you realized I wasn't easy to reach. And I used to think you were the kind of man who plotted 3 steps ahead just to control everyone else." Cassidy replied. He gave a faint laugh. I'm not so sure anymore." Cassidy looked at him. "I don't want to hurt you, Weston. I can't pretend I don't see what I see. I know. And that's exactly why I don't see you as pretending anymore." Cassidy's chest tightened. His words were so gentle, she wished she could forget them, but she knew she wouldn't. That night, back in her small apartment, Cassidy reopened the Aegis Fund file. She zoomed in on the signature, then pulled up old budget approvals with Weston's real autograph. Not the same, but anyone could learn to forge a signature. On her desk lay a pen-engraved CJ, a small gift Weston had handed her at an event the week before. A trivial thing, yet now it stung. She pushed back her chair, opened her laptop, and started a new file. Title: Who is hiding behind the mask of charitable funding? She typed a few lines, then deleted them. Typed again, then erased. Finally, she left. Only one sentence on the screen. "I once thought I knew who was moving the pieces on this board. But now, I'm beginning to suspect maybe it's the pawn choosing the path." Cassidy Jamison couldn't pinpoint when pretending had started to feel suffocating that first. She agreed to play the role of Weston Cade's temporary girlfriend out of curiosity. For career leverage, and for a chance to slip closer to the upper echelon where she suspected something was being buried. But now, the looks, the accidental touches, even the silences Weston left after each carefully measured word, all of it had spilled beyond the borders of an unsigned agreement. And when things began to feel real, Cassidy realized she was stepping into dangerous territory. Not only because of her feelings, but because someone already knew she was investigating. That evening, Cassidy stayed late at the office. She was combing through every transaction linked to the Aegis Fund, chasing more. Proof of the money laundering she suspected was being disguised as charitable giving. One report exposed a chain of transfers routed through Air Nova Satellite Company in Luxembourg, funneled into the Aegis Fund just 1 week before the gala. The amount, $850. As she downloaded the file. A message blinked on her screen. "Stop digging, Miss Jameson, before you find something that buries you." She froze. No number, no signature. Just a warning, cold as steel. Cassidy yanked the USB drive, shut down her laptop, turned off the lights, and left. For when she stepped into the elevator lobby, she saw a black, unmarked car idling across from the exit. She backed away, took the stairwell instead. Her pulse raced as she moved through the underground levels, sweat beading at the back of her neck. The sensation of being followed clung to her like a shadow. When she finally emerged onto the street behind the building, a hand grabbed her out of nowhere. Cassidy gasped, but her voice caught when she saw who it was. Weston? He stood there. No. Tie sleeves rolled, face carved in stone, but eyes sharp with alarm. "Please tell me you didn't download anything through the company Wi-Fi," he said without preamble. Cassidy blinked. "How did you?" "Because I got a security alert at 8:17, and because I know you're getting too close to a crack a lot of people don't want you touching." Cassidy tightened her grip on the USB in her coat pocket. "Are you telling me to stop?" "No." Weston's gaze held hers. "I'm telling you to be careful." She gave a dry laugh. "You're protecting me because you care, or because you're afraid what I find might implicate you?" "Both," he said instantly. "I'm not someone easily hurt, Cassidy." "But he paused, his voice dropping. "You shouldn't walk into something this big alone. The one thing I don't understand," she whispered, "is you." Silence stretched, taut as a drawn bow the next day. Cassidy took half the day off and met an old friend who worked in financial compliance. "I need these signatures verified," she said, handing him to scans, one from Weston, one from the recent suspicious approval. Her friend frowned after a glance. "Same name, yes, but the slant, the pressure different. I can't give you a courtroom answer, but if this is evidence in a laundering case, at least one of these could be forged." Cassidy exhaled, heavy. "Thanks." Outside the bank, her phone buzzed. "Weston Cade," she answered, voice cool. "I don't have any conclusions yet." "This isn't about that," Weston said. "I want you to come with me tonight." "Another gala?" "No, my home." Cassidy froze. "There are things I want you to see, not to defend myself, but so you'll know who I am if you decide to write." That evening, Weston picked her up himself, beyond the city, following a quiet road toward the suburbs. His house emerged among trees, white, minimalist, stripped of display inside. Cassidy's eyes caught the bookshelf, the piano layered in dust, and a black and white photo on the wall. A smiling woman cradling a boy of about 8. "My mother," Weston said behind her. That was the last time she smiled before she died. Cassidy turned. He wasn't looking at her. His eyes were fixed on the photograph, as if it was the only thing anchoring him. After that, he continued, "My father sent me to boarding school, taught me silence, taught me to live with one goal: control. You succeeded," Cassidy said softly. "You control everything." "Not you," Weston replied, finally turning, gaze cutting through her. "You remind me I'm human." Cassidy's heart jolted, like striking a hidden chord. She didn't know when she had moved closer, only that by the time Weston lifted his hand, hovering against her cheek, without quite touching her pulse, was frantic. "Are you afraid of me?" he whispered. "No," she said. "I'm afraid of trusting you." And that was when Weston truly touched her, not with his hand, but with his eyes, with a silence heavier than any vow. That night, Cassidy didn't write. She didn't open her laptop. She didn't map charts or dig reports. She simply sat by her apartment window, USB in hand, watching the city blaze beneath. Her team knew she was standing between two sides of a war, and in the middle of those sides was a hand that had once been cold, now beginning to tremble. The next morning, Cassidy woke with a hollow feeling in her chest, not from exhaustion, but because she knew today would not be like the days before. The instincts of a seasoned journalist whispered that something had shifted, something she no longer had the power to control. She opened her laptop. Her inbox was full. But only one sender made her heart stop. From n.guillermo@airnova.co subject. It's time you look at who's really behind this. Cassidy clicked. Inside was just one line, check Damon Reed's records. And if you're smart, pay attention to what Weston Cade never signed. Attached was a scanned folder, power of attorney papers, internal financial reports, and a confidentiality agreement signed 4 months ago by Damon Reed. Under Weston's name, Cassidy zoomed in on each page. Company seal, Weston's name. But the handwriting, it wasn't his. Her lips pressed tight, her hand trembling slightly. So it was true. Weeks of suspicion weren't paranoia. Someone had forged Weston's signature, using his name to move illicit funds. Cassidy grabbed her phone and dialed Weston. No answer. For the first time since she'd met him. Her voice shrank as she left a message. Weston, something's wrong. Please call me back. That afternoon, she didn't head to her desk. Instead, she slipped into the stairwell, down to the technical archives, the floor, where original printed documents were kept for 1 year. The records clerk frowned at her. You don't have clearance. I have authorization from the comms director. Check box 12287 for me, Cassidy said, flashing her badge and a forged slip she'd prepared the night before. She knew she was breaking the rules, but she also knew waiting for the right moment meant waiting forever. That night, Cassidy returned home late. She had barely set her bag down when the doorbell rang. She opened it, Weston, his shirt rumpled, his face tired. But his eyes for the first time not frozen. Where were you all day? She asked, unable to hide the worry. I went to see the last person who authorized a deal with Aegis, Damon Reed. Cassidy exhaled. No, Weston said quietly. My father. Cassidy went still. Your father. He nodded. He was once Air Nova's largest shareholder until he sold his stake last year. But I've just learned he still holds investment trusts in Luxembourg, indirectly controlling the Aegis fund transfers. Cassidy dropped into a chair. You think he's behind it all? I don't think anymore. Weston pulled a contract copy from his jacket. I got this directly from an old board archivist. Damon's just a pawn. The hand pulling strings is his. Cassidy stared. What will you do? I don't know, Weston whispered. Part of me wants to burn it all down. Part of me still can't believe he used my name to launder money. She looked at him, the man who always walked tall, unshaken, controlled, now sitting like a boy betrayed by his own blood. Her hand brushed lightly against his. You're not alone, Weston. Not this time. But truth rarely gives people time to breathe. Later that night, as Cassidy stepped outside to throw out trash, she noticed a stranger standing near her car. She froze. The man approached, not hurried, not overtly threatening. But his eyes were empty. Miss Jameson, his voice was calm, too calm. I'm here to remind you, some things once known are best kept quiet. Otherwise, they disappear. Cassidy backed away. Who are you? Someone who's seen smarter women than you leave this city in silence. He tilted his head. Or not leave at all. At that moment, footsteps echoed behind her. Weston, he said nothing, only stepped between Cassidy and the man. She's not alone, Weston said, voice colder than ice. The man glanced at him, lips curling faintly. "Mr. Cade, don't let your feelings cloud you. You know what your father is capable of. And I know what I'm capable of." Weston shot back, stepping closer. "Leave it." The man withdrew, melting into the dark as if he'd never been there. Cassidy stood still, her hand trembling. Weston turned to her, his hand firm on her shoulder. "I won't let anyone touch you." "You say that, but what about trusting me?" Her voice cracked. "What if one day I have to publish the truth? What if I can't choose your side?" He held her gaze long. Then slowly, Weston said, "As long as you don't lie to me, the rest I can live with." Cassidy's heart clenched, and for the first time, she didn't know if she could keep that promise. On a rare, quiet morning at Air Nova, Cassidy Jamison sat in the 18th floor conference room with Weston Cade for the first time. Like true allies rather than a pretend couple. In front of them lay a financial printout from Weston's private terminal, encrypted, reserved only for executives. "I found this in the January report," Weston said, his finger pointing to a small line. "Payment to Quasar Holdings, $420,000, approved by D. Reed, via auto proxy." Cassidy leaned closer. "I know Quasar. They only exist on paper. A shell company in a Jess's laundering network. Damon used proxy software to sign in your place. And if I hadn't traced the details, no one would know the signature was fake." She looked at him. "So what now? Are you going public?" Weston exhaled. "I plan to clean house first, fire Damon, call a closed meeting with the board and you." Cassidy hesitated. "I need to write a tay, but not yet. Not until I know everything." He nodded. "I trust you." The words fell into the silence between them like an unspoken vow. But even in that fragile calm, the undertow began to stir. 11:47 a.m., less than 10 minutes after Cassidy left the conference room, her phone started buzzing nonstop. Messages, emails, calls. She opened one. Breaking Air Nova's shadow deal, fake signatures, and money laundering in the sky. An article had just gone live on the Phoenix Post, written by Kyle Sharadina, journalist she had collaborated with 3 years ago. The piece was sharp. Too sharp, stuffed with details so sensitive they could only have come from an insider. Names, figures, even Quasar Holdings and the Aegis Fund called out explicitly. Cassidy froze. The article was good. Too good. Comprehensive, polished, like it had been built from the very data she had spent the last 2 months gathering. But she had never shared it with anyone, except Weston, Dot, and Kyle. 4 weeks ago, when she was still wavering, Kyle had asked what she was working on. She had only let slip a phrase, a shady charity fund, nothing more. Not enough to spin this. Unless Cassidy raced back to her office, slammed the door, opened her laptop. The email she'd once sent to Kyle was still there, one single line. "I might be tracking a suspicious charity fund linked to Luxembourg, but nothing confirmed." That was all it took. Cassidy dropped her head against the desk. She had no proof Kyle had stolen her work. But part of her data had once been stored on an unencrypted personal drive. If Kyle had an accomplice inside the system, he could have siphoned it remotely. Footsteps pounded in the hallway. Cassidy looked up as the door burst open. Weston, her chest clenched. His face was nothing like that morning. No calm, no protective warmth, no trust. Only the old coldness, laced now with hurt. "You leaked that article?" His voice was hoarse, clipped. Cassidy stood. "No. I didn't." "Then who?" "Kyle Sheridan. You used to work with him." "Yes, but I didn't, Weston. I swear. I didn't leak anything." His eyes darkened. "You had all the data. You had motive. You had a story that could revive your journalism career. You didn't need to stab me directly. You only had to let someone else write it for you." You're talking as if I'm a spy. No, Cassidy. I'm talking as if I don't know who you are anymore. She staggered back. You don't believe me? I want to, he choked out. But I also want to survive in a world where everyone's cards are on the table. Cassidy clenched her fists. Then believe me? 'Cause if you can't, then you never trusted me in the first place. The air froze. Weston said nothing more. He only stepped back, turned, and left. The door shut in this time. Cassidy didn't stop it. That evening, she went home alone. No Bentley, no message. No glittering earrings. Only a headline spreading like wildfire, and her heart splintering in a place she hadn't expected it to hurt. She opened her laptop, pulled up the article again, and read every line with the eyes of someone inside the storm. The piece wasn't wrong, but the timing was wrong. The writer was wrong. And the person who would pay the price was the one she most wanted to protect. She dialed Kyle's number. Busy, then dead. She typed one message. I don't know how you got that data. But if Weston gets hurt because of this, you won't find me sitting still. That night, Cassidy didn't sleep. She sat by her window. City lights flickering against her eyes like a reminder. Trust doesn't break because of truth, but because people stop listening before truth has a chance to arrive. And what hurt most wasn't Weston's anger. It was that he hadn't looked back at her once before he walked away. Air Nova headquarters, Monday, 9 a.m. The 26th floor boardroom was packed. Board members, senior lawyers, internal communications reps. No one raised their voice, but the air was thick, ready to erupt like a storm. Weston Cade sat at the head of the table, charcoal suit impeccable, his face carved in ice. Across from him was Foster Lang, a longtime board member, the same man who had once backed Weston's appointment as CEO. 3 years ago, we've held an internal vote, Foster said, locking eyes with him. The consensus is clear. You are suspended from executive duty for 14 days pending the outcome of the investigation. Weston didn't flinch. No nod, no protest. He only stared at the board's display screen, where the latest headlines scrolled across. CEO Weston Cade under money. Laundering probe, Air Nova at risk of losing billion-dollar Atlantic Alliance contract. Someone coughed. Someone clicked. A pen someone else avoided his gaze. Weston stood. Fine, he said, slow and measured. But hear me. If you're chasing the wrong man, the cost won't just be my career. It will be this company's survival. He turned to leave. No one stopped him. Elsewhere, Cassidy Jamison sat in her small rented apartment, drowning in a storm of files. Kyle Sheridan's article printouts and hacked email logs. She didn't care that she was banned from Air Nova. Property. She didn't care that the press had branded her the two-faced lover. She only cared about one thing. Weston had been set up, and she had to prove it. She started with the IP logs from Air Nova, its internal email system, calling in a favor from an old friend in IT to trace unusual logins. One address appeared again. And again, 172.16.84.99, a remote conferencing server reserved for outside guests. Not Weston's, not Kyle's. A name surfaced in her memory. Madeline Royce Damon, Reed's former senior assistant. Fired months ago for leaking confidential files. Cassidy bit her lip. She remembered an old rumor Madeline had once been entangled with Kyle. She immediately called the Phoenix Post. Kyle isn't here, the secretary said. He took 2 weeks off, out of state. Cassidy hung up. A picture snapped into place. Kyle wasn't the mastermind. He was just a pawn, and the hand moving the pieces belonged to Madeline, someone who knew every crack in Air Nova's system. That evening, Cassidy waited in the shadows of the parking garage where Weston often came to be alone. No bodyguards. No driver, no endless phone calls. Just him and the silence tearing at him from the inside. She stepped closer. He saw her. But said nothing. "You need to hear this," she said, heart pounding. "I'm not sure I want to hear anything from you." "Then listen as a stranger," she shot back. "I checked the logs. There's someone besides Kyla Rogue IP inside Damon's network. I believe it's Madeline Royce." He froze. Cassidy pressed on. "I don't need you to trust me. I just need you to know I'm still investigating. I'm still standing with you." Weston looked at her for the first time in days. "Why?" "Because even if you don't trust me anymore, I still trust you," Cassidy said, eyes shining. "And because if I've learned anything from this, it's that when people stop pretending to love, that's when it really hurts to lose each other." No one spoke, but Weston took one step toward her. Not as a CEO, not as a man who controlled everything, but as someone afraid of losing the only thing real in a world built on lies. The next day, Cassidy filed an official request to interview Madeline Royce under her credentials as an independent investigative journalist. The receptionist smirked. "She's gone. Left town last week. Do you know where she went?" "Didn't leave much. But there was one odd thing. I saw an email about a flight to Zurich, booked under a false name. Strange. Zurich.Switzerland. A global financial hub. The perfect place to launder money, then vanish." Cassidy turned away. But this time, she wasn't alone. Weston was waiting in the lobby. "We'll find her," he said. Cassidy blinked. He nodded. This time, no pretending. Zurich International Airport, 5 a.m., no camera flashes, no assistants. No one waiting with an Air Nova placard. Only Weston and Cassidy, 2 carry-on bags. And the chill of early autumn seeping through their coats. "She's here," Cassidy said, eyes fixed on her phone, where a tracer email from the underground banking system showed Madeline logging in under her false identity. Weston only nodded. He didn't need further confirmation. From the moment Cassidy had chosen to stand by him when the entire world turned its back, he knew the only thing he wanted to hold on to wasn't his CEO title. It was her. They rented a small room near Niederdorf, Zurich's quiet old quarter, close enough to the bank headquarters. Cassidy stretched red threads across the wall, pinning notes and printouts collected since New York. Everything pointed to one truth. Madeline wasn't just Kyle's accomplice. She was the mastermind manipulating data, pulling in intermediaries, funneling dirty money while using Weston's name as cover. And now she was about to vanish, completing her final transfer before disappearing off the radar. "I'll meet the bank contact," Weston said. "If I show up myself, they'll have to listen. And if Madeline realizes you're here, even better," he replied. "I want her to know I'm not standing alone anymore." Cassidy glanced at him, the faint morning light carved across his face, not the cold mask of a powerful CEO, but a man reclaiming his honor with the last thing he had left. And she was the one choosing to walk beside him. 2 days later, confirmation came. Madeline would attend a private meeting with the bank under the alias Evelyn M. Rosenthal, moving $1.8 million out of the system. The meeting was set for 11 a.m. 18th floor, secure room with only one controlled entry. Cassidy hid a recorder under her waistband. Weston wore a suit, concealing a micro camera sewn into his shirt. Button. Everything was ready. 10:58 a.m. Madeline entered. Red stilettos, wine-colored lipstick, her familiar waves of hair. But her eyes were different, sharp with suspicion. When she saw Weston, she froze. You're not allowed here." "I don't need permission," Weston said, pulling out a print of the covert wire transfers. "I just need you to answer one question. Who authorized the final move?" Madeline's jaw clenched. Cassidy hit record. "You're being documented." She said clearly, "Your answer determines your sentence." Madeline smirked. "And if I don't talk, and the press gets everything." Cassidy shot back. "This time, no one will cover for you, not even Kyle." A flicker of hesitation. Then Madeline's gaze darted to Weston's button camera. She knew. She understood. And at last, she nodded. Double quotes, "Fine, I'll take the blame." That afternoon, Weston's name was cleared. Madeline was arrested at the airport, caught trying to board a flight to Malta with forged papers. She confessed to the entire network, exposing high-ranking members of a multinational investment fund. The headlines exploded. Airnova secured its billion-dollar Atlantic Alliance contract. Weston was invited back as CEO, but he declined. He sent only a short email. "I don't need a title to be myself. I found something more important, tanned. I won't trade it away again." 3 weeks later, in New York, a small bookstore in West Village, Cassidy was shelving titles in the Women in Journalism section when a familiar figure stepped inside. Weston, a gray shirt, no suit, no tie, holding a small box. "What are you doing here?" she teased, though her pulse raced just as it always had. "I heard there's a woman named Cassidy Jameson. Here's someone who not only dismantled an international laundering scheme, but also made a CEO walk away from his throne." She quit, Cassidy joked. Now she only writes stories that are real. Weston handed her the box. Inside was a slim silver ring, set with a single crystal knot, a diamond, but a deep sapphire blue, the same color as the bracelet she had worn the night they first walked into that wedding together. He said, "No grand ceremony, no pretending. Just you on the truth we've made ours." Cassidy's eyes stung. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "We began with a lie, and we end with the truth," Weston answered. "And the truth, Cassidy," his voice softened, "is that I've loved you since the moment you kept pretending not to care." She laughed through her tears and nodded in the quiet of that small bookstore. Surrounded by shelves filled with titles about truth, investigation, and courage, they embraced. This time, no pretending. Asterisk, perhaps the most beautiful part of this story isn't just that Weston was cleared or that those in the shadows were exposed. It's that he and Cassidy realized true love begins the moment we no longer need to pretend. Thank you for listening with Snail's story. If today's story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe, so every week we can share more heartfelt, healing stories together.